So good evening and welcome to tonight's NCRN presentation and discussion entitled Community Rights, Working Together for Real People Power. And we're excited to have Greg Coleridge here tonight. He's the Outreach Director for Move to Amend. Now, National Community Rights Network is a national organization made up of 6 affiliate states, Oregon and Colorado, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Virginia. So each of those states have community right network groups made up of either local groups or county groups working for community rights and the rights of nature. So we are an organization that is trying to educate and get people interested in taking more interest in their government, in protecting the environment of which we are a part of nature. And so there's many commonalities between our work and Move to Amend with getting people energized. So I'm going to give a brief introduction about Greg right now, and then he can begin his presentation. So Greg Coleridge is Outreach Director of Move to Amend. He previously worked for more than 3 decades with the American Friends Service Committee in Ohio, where he educated, advocated, and organized on a range of justice, peace, environmental, and democracy issues, including helping coordinate Move to Amend activities in the Buckeye State. He's the author of Citizens Over Corporations, A Brief History of Democracy in Ohio and Challenges to Freedom in the Future. That was 2003. Writer of the Democracy Corporation, The Story of Citizens and Corporations in Ohio, and contributed several articles to the anthology Defining Corporations, Defining Democracy, a book of history and strategy, 2001. He currently maintains and distributes via email a weekly Real Democracy History Calendar and Monetary History Calendar, which sound interesting. Greg is a board member of the Alliance for Just Money. He previously was a principal with the Program on Corporations, Law and Democracy, that's POCLAD, and served an elected term on the National Governing Board of Common Cause. So thank you very much, Greg, and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Susie. Appreciate so much the invitation from you and all the rest. And thank you so much for all of you participating. I see some friends on the call. Good to see Ben, and I don't see the face, but the name of Tish. It's always good to see Buckeyes on the call. I'm sort of a little prejudiced. So toward that end, a number of folks, including some Move to Amenders, Madeline Watts and Carla Rautenberg, who I work with, and some other Buckeyes, Bill Lyons, greetings, Bill, hope all is well, and Marky as well. So anyway, good to see and be with all of you, and thank you so much for being a part of this. All right, so this is the fun technological part of trying to share the screen. All right, so I was asked to provide some reflections this evening, which I will try to keep the time within about 20 minutes or so, to talk a little bit about how I came to do this work, very briefly about that, but more about Move to Amend and what kind of possibilities, opportunities there may be for some collaboration in the not too distant future between our respective outfits. So let me begin by just sharing, if I might. A little bit, as mentioned in the intro, I used to work for the American Friends Service Committee as the political and economic justice program director, where I worked for more than 30 years. And as doing a lot of traditional work in the nonprofit field, working for this Quaker-related social justice, peace, and economic justice organization, did all the sort of traditional kinds of education, advocacy, and organizing work related to trying to bring positive change. And like many of you, sort of at some point, ran into the proverbial blockage of where it just seemed like I was getting nowhere fast on any number of issues. And it was pretty clear that I could only achieve with no matter how many other people I was working with, no matter how many other groups, however nicely or not nicely we tried to approach the power structure, we just were not able to achieve any significant wins, any significant justice, peace, nonviolence, and the like. And so it became sort of a frustrating venture, being involved as I was working in this way. But I came across this outfit called POCLAD. Some of you know Mike Ferner from Toledo. He invited me to this workshop that Jane Ann Morris and Richard Grossman, connected to POCLAD at that time, were involved in. That workshop was, as you can read under Jane Ann's picture, called Rethinking the Corporation, Rethinking Democracy, and it was one of those aha experiences that maybe some of you have experienced, others maybe just sort of gradually came into this awareness and understanding about how the whole system really is not broken, but fixed, as in rigged to benefit the wealthy few and corporate entities. And so that got me sort of recalibrating my work, both with the American Friends Service Committee and other sort of neighborhood groups I was working with. But out of that gathering, we were challenged by Richard and Jane Ann. I'm sure both of you or all of you know both of these individuals, but if you've not visited Jane Ann's website, democracythemepark.org or poclad.org, please do. They're well worth the visitation and the reflection of materials. So anyway, we were challenged out of that gathering to say, look, we've done a little bit of work given how corporations, the corporate form, were given life, if you will, metaphorically, at the state level, but we don't know a whole hell of a lot about this. You need to go out and do some work and help us learn. So those of us who participated in this weekend gathering took that to heart, and that resulted in a couple of resources that were mentioned. One is this booklet, 58 pages or so, called Citizens Over Corporations, and really use that as a tool to go around the state of Ohio to talk about, hold workshops around, created some materials. And that led to this video, 30-minute in length, called Corp or Nation, the Story of Citizens or Corporations in Ohio around 2000. That again, we tried to milk for all it was worth, used it, got it on a couple public TV stations and local cable access stations, as well as showed it to a variety of different groups all over the state. So this was one way that we tried to rethink the kind of work we were doing with AFSC, but also to help people elsewhere in Ohio sort of help rethink their work. But going back to AFSC, we continue to work in some sort of somewhat traditional fashion, but try to ramp it up and take a little greater risk. One of which was in the whole arena of campaign finance reform, a number of efforts along the way here in Akron that we were involved in. This particular venture in 1998, working with the Akron Catholic Commission, was successful in getting a campaign finance reform bill passed that established among the lowest contribution limits in the country, but also a few things that were outrightly unconstitutional, going against the Buckley versus Vallejo money equals free speech decision. But what the hell, we thought they were appropriate and they were outrageous, and the citizens agreed with us. It passed in every ward, in every precinct of every ward, but like 3 in the entire city. But of course, some of those provisions that said if you don't vote in the city, if you don't live in the city, you shouldn't be able to contribute or donate or invest in politicians locally. And we had a maximum contribution limits and other things that people loved, but of course was unconstitutional. It went to the 6th Circuit. We appealed. We argued, but of course it got thrown out. They tried to throw out the rest of it by going to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court failed to hear it. So anyway, we got some educational value out of it. And I know, that there is some value in knowing that some of what you're doing is overtly unconstitutional, but is worth the fight for the educational, for the organizing, for the visioning potential. The other thing we were involved in with, in this case, Jack Somebody was with AFSCME, Ohio Council 8, working to try to protect the privatization or corporatization of public utilities in the city of Akron, in particular the sewers and water system. SOS was Save Our Sewers. This was a coalition between AFSC and AFSCME that sought to protect the public resources, public assets, to keep them public and not to put them in the private sphere of corporate entities, which Veolia Corporation, a French-based water corporation, international, global in kind, was set to take over. And we fought it and had everybody, as we often like to say, everybody was against this in the city except the voters. We even had LeBron James come out against our campaign because some of the effort in the city was to say they were going to use some of the money garnered from selling off or privatizing the sewer system to put into education for low-income communities, particularly low-income African-American students, of which LeBron James was really into. So the mayor sort of got LeBron to go into it. So we're one of the few people that have actually, or efforts that have actually defeated LeBron James. But anyway. So within the sphere of AFSC, when Move to Amend got going in 2010, we became sort of the Ohio network coordinator and helped start a number of chapters. Early on, it wasn't really called Move to Amend, it was called the Campaign to Legalize Democracy, a fitting sort of label for what was needed then, and of course, still needed all the more now, and worked to not only start affiliates around the state, but worked with communities around Ohio as other groups were working in other states to try to help get people to understand the need for a constitutional amendment to abolish all never intended inalienable constitutional rights for corporations and to reverse the equally bizarre constitutional doctrine of political money in elections being equivalent to First Amendment free speech that Buckley versus Vallejo initiated, but there have been subsequent decisions following that. Some of the successes were these that are mentioned. A number of communities passed resolutions by their city council, which of course doesn't really have any effect. They're merely statements. Other communities passed initiatives that, again, were not able to do very much other than to officially force the city in question to call on Congress to send a declaration to Congress as well as to state legislatures, since amending the Constitution involves both a federal, if you go through the traditional route, changing the Constitution to get the federal elected officials to pass an amendment, as well as then to validate or to certify or to ratify at the state level. So we got those 10 communities to do that up in, as well as the city of Cleveland, where we were able to garner enough signatures to get on the ballot, but city council just chose to create it and not even put it on the ballot. So as you can see, most of the time when we were able to get these initiatives, and again, people at the local level were the ones who were really hustling to collect signatures and to make this an issue. And it should be said, these initiatives also created, in each and every case, a mandated city-sponsored either annual or biannual public hearing in which the city would have to sponsor for citizens or residents or anybody to appear to either, again, every year, every other year, speak to the impact of money in elections or corporate rule on their communities, on their lives, on Mother Earth, on whatever the case may be. And so those still live. In fact, last night, there was the 5th Democracy Day. We call them all Democracy Day public hearings in Brecksville and in Mentor. Next week is in Chagrin Falls. So this has been a way to keep this issue alive. Again, it's not changing local law like the Community Bill of Rights and Rights of Nature efforts are that you all have been involved in, but it's been a way to tangibly take this national piece and to localize it and to give it some continuity over time beyond the initial phase or date of its passage. And it's also a wonderful way to reach out, to organize, to invite other groups, to send a representative to speak on how their issue intersects with corporate rule in money and elections. So all of that is sort of, much of it anyway, predated the time I became involved with Move to Amend. And just sort of it as an FYI, the original proposed amendment to Move to Amend contains really four elements. The two on the left that are highlighted still exist: abolishing corporate personhood or corporate constitutional rights in all of its forms, as well as establishing that money is not speech. But the other two were part of the original petition that was used to garner support from people. And right away, when we went live on the day, basically the day of the Citizens United ruling, January 21st, 2010, within like 48 hours, I think we had like 200,000 people who had signed the petition. And the petition contained these all four elements, including guaranteeing the right to vote and to participate and to have our votes and participation count, as well as that fourth measure, protecting local communities, their economies, and democracies against illegitimate preemption actions by global, national, and state governments. When we first sought to take these principles and put them into what became known as the We the People Amendment, we wanted all of these to stick. And we were told that, look, it's going to be tough enough to get these two on the left going. I mean, you will never get anybody to, get out of the gate, let alone get to first base. Maybe with the right to vote, maybe, but if you put the local communities and added to it, forget it. So we made the decision and said, all right, we're going to start with these, but we understand that what we're trying to do is merely a stepping stone to more fundamental change. And that gets us to going into what some of the purposes and work of Move to Amend is. Our mission being that we're a coalition of hundreds of organizations and hundreds of thousands of individuals committed to social and economic justice, ending corporate rule, and building a vibrant democracy that is genuinely accountable to the people, not corporate interests. Three goals is to pass this We the People Amendment. It's called HJR 48. It's been introduced now 4 times. We're waiting for 48 to come up in the 117th session of Congress. And once that does, it's up to like 25 now. It'll be introduced probably in a couple of weeks. And so it'll be the 5th time it'll be introduced in Congress. But that's only one of 3 goals. The others 2 are to build a multi-ethnic, intergenerational, cross-class democracy movement across issues and oppressions, as well as to provoke discussion and organizing about how to make real the promise of democracy through constitutional renewal. So we're using this amendment really, we have no illusions as to how far this will go. We hope it'll come to pass, but even if not, it is an organizing, an educational, and an advocacy tool to talk about and to build sort of this movement that we hope will be quite diverse and quite powerful, as well as to use it again as a stepping stone to talk about much more fundamental constitutional change that we desperately need. Our values and principles that we hold dear, that have been centered from day one of our work, is almost first and foremost to say, look, people have been oppressed and have been isolated and deemed for purposes of dividing and conquering and making us all weak, by saying we have to commit to focusing on anti-oppression and organizing in solidarity with people who are on the front lines, which historically have been people of color, women, differently abled, people of different sexual orientations, low income. We need to obviously to build power, build movements, and do so in coalition, but we have to be mindful of focusing on working at the grassroots and respecting people at the grassroots. We absolutely positively have to be on the other side of the learning curve when it comes to political education, since we've all been sort of mystified, and of course the narrative being, we've all been hijacked into the myths and the lores of how things are supposed to work, how democracy from day one has been so wonderful, and how we are really not all that powerful, and we have to leave it to the experts. So we are dedicated to ongoing political education as to the kind of fix that we're in and how we need to take charge of conditions of our own lives. And lastly, to be both politically and they go together, economically independent, so that we are not dependent on the corporate crowd, political parties, big time foundations, the super rich, you name it. So therefore, we are very much focused on being independent, both politically, not connected to any party or ideology, but also economically together. Our structure is we have a national team of board of directors, staff, several committees, caucuses, including a labor caucus, interfaith caucus, arts and culture in the past, not so much functioning now, and a next generation of young people caucus. Local and state level, we have state networks, Ohio being one, various local affiliate groups, about 50 around the country, working groups. These are organizations that work on a variety of issues, one of which is to pass the We the People Amendment. So their lift in being connected to us, expectations, is far less than they would be if they were a formal affiliate. And then something we just started new, being called advocates. These are individual sort of Johnny or Jane Appleseeds who are where they are, who take our stuff to go out, if they're parts of groups, to sort of plant those seeds of what we're doing, to help people see the connections between whatever work they're doing and the work of trying to end corporate rule and money in politics. And hopefully, by being an advocate, they'll find a few other advocates. And if you get 3 or 5 people, then you can apply to become an affiliate. Our communications and education, internal, some of the same stuff that you may do, external, the same. We do emailing. We have monthly call with our affiliates, working groups, and advocates, just so that we're all on the same page. We have something called a monthly call of collaboration that is specifically for our affiliates to sort of come and sort of grapple among themselves about, hey, what's working? Let's learn from one another. Monthly take action webinars that are focused on building up skills that coalitions, about coalition building, working with the media, whatever affiliates are interested in hearing about. External, we have websites, social media, various public programs, something called a monthly live report on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube once a month. Our national director, Caitlin Saboki Belknap, talks about what we're doing, and something called Making Sense with Move to Amend every week on Friday at 3 o'clock, where a couple of staff, committee, Tish has joined me on one of these, where we just sort of deconstruct the week's news from our various perspectives. Something that we feel is extremely important, and I know that all of you have your equivalent kind of, this is sort of in the realm of political education, something that we call movement education. It's a program that we created. It's now in its 3rd iteration, and it basically is a free curriculum designed to provide analysis, historical perspective, and exercises for activists and organizers. It started out being exclusively for Move to Amend folks who are in affiliates to sort of kind of catch up and get on the same page of what they need to know politically, educationally, organizing, both outside of themselves, but also internally. But as you can see, it addresses issues of corporatism, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and related oppressive structures. It's very much in tune in commitment to our values of anti-oppression and continued learning. And now, because it's where it is, and I can send out that link if people are interested, we've teamed up with this group called Radical Guide, and it's now available. Anybody can take it, and it's sort of generic enough to where you don't have to be a Move to Amender, whether it's an individual, advocate, or affiliate, to benefit from it. And you can go at it at your own pace. I think we'll even send you a little certificate at the end of it once you fill stuff out. But it's designed to sort of help get us all on the external and internal other side of the learning curve of what it means to be a good organizer, but also a good builder of an authentic democracy group. Our successes nationally, we have about not quite 500,000 people have signed our motion to amend petition. 116th Congress, we had 75 co-sponsors in the House of the We the People Amendment, several hundred organizational endorsers. I think it's between 500 and 600, and 705 communities, last count, that either at the municipal level, city councils, county councils, state legislatures have passed a resolution calling for amendment or ballot initiative. And I think that number's 350 or so communities around the country that have done that. We're spending the first 3.5 months of 2021 really focusing on what we call the move to the 117th Congress campaign. And here what we're trying to do is ramp up very quickly from 75 co-sponsors to 100 right away. And, you've got 2 years in any congressional session, but we want to try to get the 75 we had last session plus 25 more to use that as a stepping stone for momentum. You know how it works. People see success, and that can drive then wanting to be involved in other things. And some of those other things is this new project that we have just launched, a joint project with Democracy Unlimited, sort of the 501c4 arm of Move to Amend, that is looking more in depth. It's a website, basically just an arena at this point, but it's a space that we hope will, once we start in April and May, paying much more attention to. We formally launched this at the end of 2020, but we'll be paying much greater attention and devoting much greater energy and resources of all sorts beginning this spring. Again, it's merely at this point a website to host learning and organizing materials, conversation, and action items to sort of think about having a fundamentally different constitution. Whether you believe it needs to be fundamentally renewed or just scrapped and started over, that's what we're going to sort of talk about. And the means for doing that and the places and how we're going to do it is through a variety of different building educational. We launched this by having something called a movement, a movement people's assembly that Ben Price was a part of, that sort of got this whole thing going, where people come together and start visioning what is not in the Constitution that should be, what's in there that shouldn't be. So we're hoping to broaden and deepen this kind of conversation and bring a lot more people to the table where they're all at the same place, and let's sort of go at it and see where it goes. We have no idea where this is going to head up because we're just sort of laying the groundwork. We're focusing on the means, we're focusing on the methods, we're focusing on the how. Where it goes, what the ends are, is going to be a function of the organic nature of the energy, the ideas, the vision, the temperament, the values of the individuals who participate. So before we kind of get into talking about some possibilities, I think we need to assess where the hell are we in terms of opportunities as we start 2021, or already into almost two months through it. So a few things that we can grapple with this, and you may agree with all of these or none of these, but just from our perspective, here's a few things of where we think we are at the moment to sort of lay ourselves, or beginning, or use as a springboard to talk about where we need to go. And sort of the opportunities that I think exist are these. That, the pandemic and resulting economic hardship has exposed, has it not, the fundamental at-root flaws of so many of the systems in our society, economic, social, political, that I think are calling for fundamental solutions. My God, you're even hearing some liberal Democrats saying, you got to go big. And so where have we heard that before? Not really anywhere. So, I mean, it's just obviously a lot of it rhetorical, but some of it is, I think some people realize that there's going to be a whole lot of pitchforks in the street unless there is something done that is dramatically different. It's still not dramatically going to be dramatically enough, but nevertheless, there is that realization, and certainly that realization is magnified much more on steroids in communities, particularly on frontline communities and with young people. And so here is an opportunity to take advantage of. Creating real democracy or real community is, I think, another opportunity. Yes, we need to work for fundamental change, but I think people are realizing, my gosh, the system out there isn't going to help us as it is constituted right now, at least between now and if we ever get to that place where it fundamentally does meet our needs. We got to build community. We have to start helping one another to meet some tangible needs. And so let's figure out a way that we can do that in an integrated fashion at the same time, not instead of, but simultaneously as we work for fundamental change. Social service and social change go hand in hand. I think an opportunity is to reassess our relationship to one another and to the earth itself. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And all the more, I think, underscored by what has gone on in Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana. To think and act more, this word locally is a word that I first heard through a former National Peace Ed director of American Friends Service Committee by the name of David Gracie, who has since passed. But he said, we have to, when we do work, wherever we do work, we have to do it locally. We have to do one part of it local and one part global and everything else in between. It's not one or the other, it's all of it simultaneously that makes, of course, our heads spin, not to mention our eyes go crazy since they're looking in different directions simultaneously, but that's got to be how it is. And I think ever more so now. Coalition building, a great opportunity now to build inclusive, democratic, and powerful, whether it's a single movement or multiple movements. Some people have said, we're probably not going to get anywhere and achieve anything unless we achieve everything. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But I think we have to think, at least, again, it's focusing on doing the right thing, laying the groundwork and seeing where it goes. There's some opportunity there. Winning over some, I'm just saying some hearts and minds of those who are not on our side. And that includes maybe even some of the Trumpsters. Now you can see, and I don't know if you can quite see the total, and maybe some of you already are familiar with this graph called Spectrum of Allies, that are sort of pieces of pies of where people lie in connection to where you are. And obviously, every once in a while, you get people going from active opposition to active support, but that's pretty rare. But maybe we need to think differently. That I think that if we are able to talk about some of the fundamental changes that are needed, we're going to win some people, maybe not to become active supporters. And if we set ourselves up to say we're trying to get active supporters and they're neutral now, that may be too far to move. If they can just move from being an active opponent to a passive opponent, or passive to just sitting on their hands and being neutral, or those who have been sitting on their hands to do a little bit in favor of us, that's a real win. And I think if we think of it in these terms, we will achieve some success if we tell the truth, we lay out what needs to be said, and we provide an alternative that is going to address in kind, in scale, the solutions to the problems that we're facing. And finally, greater acceptance of non-cooperation and intervention to basically go big in terms of taking risk. And that includes some resistance strategies, including civil disobedience. I think we're destined to seeing a lot more of that. All right, where the hell are we in terms of challenges? Very quickly, we face these multiple crises, and in terms of health, it's not just physical from the pandemic, but there's a whole lot of people out there that are psychologically messed up, as opposed to what's going on from isolation, from just not being able to handle what all is going on, the simultaneous crises. We got to acknowledge that. And the last one, all those other ones are self-explanatory, but the last one I just want to lift up, educational. I don't mean here in terms of students that are missing out a whole year of schooling, legitimate schooling. I'm talking about people out there who are believing that up is down, right is left, in is out, black is white. I mean, there is just the whole different world of where people are getting their information. We know it, right? And somehow we've got to face this crisis out there of where the objective truth, to a certain extent, it's always been somewhat relative, right? Because of our biases, but this is a whole different arena. This is out of the arena, out of the county of where some people are believing, this wild and crazy stuff that we've got to figure out how to deal with. Pressure to moderate, it's a real challenge. Moderate, with all the reformist legislation out there, some of it is good as far as it goes. It just doesn't go far enough, such as the For the People Act and economic growth policies that are, lethal to the planet. Neoliberalism, of course, there's the pressure to moderate because, we can't embarrass Democrats, and we have to focus on the next election, like we're always focused on elections, right? We can never challenge people because, to do so means you're going to provide a opening for Republicans to come in if you're Democrats. And plus, we don't have time to deal with issues that are too risky because they won't sell to the independents or to the, to the suburban housewives. So we have to constantly, proverbially, be focused on elections and strategies. Let's only focus and do lobbying. Working with reformist groups in the nonprofit industrial complex is also something that we're always told to, particularly now, you got to come together, Greg, and move to amend. You got to work with these inside the Beltway groups, because here you got your best chance now to bring about at least some change, which of course we know that when we do that and we get too close, we oftentimes get co-opted, divided and conquered, and our message gets distorted. Coalition building, well, it's a flip, right? There's some positives, opportunities to build coalitions, but there's some challenges in terms of who do you try to bring in? Are you sacrificing your message, your values, and the like along the way? There's this polarization between and within political parties, within people, the whole right-wing populism stuff, as we're trying to build populism, but of a different kind, right? That's bottom up, that's authentically democratic, that's focusing on respect and dignity of all people. To bring that word up right now is really tough. Funding, of course, is a challenge. We're not only in competition with reformist groups, but now with progressive candidates that are appealing to the same small donors. It certainly hurt us almost fatally, Move to Amend in 2020, because so many of the people that had been given to us in 2020 said, well, Greg, Move to Amend, we just got to get Biden in, or get, the progressive fill in the blank candidates in. And so they just poured a disproportionate share of their money into those candidates who were appealing to small donations. Media, of course, we know the corporate media, the corporatization, sensationalism sells, polarization is profitable. They're just set up to continue to focus on the things that are either irrelevant or things that are just, polar opposites of what's going on. Maintaining the integrity of means and ends in the face of existential crisis. What do I mean here? This is a conundrum, my friends, that I ask myself every day. It's what I call, I don't know, what do you call it? Sort of trying to be, just trying to hurry slowly, if you will. How's that for a paradox? But I mean, to do things the right way, but to understand that we're facing this multiple crises, and we can't cut corners, but at the same time, we have to face the severity and deal with things promptly. And how we deal with the mix between means and ends, with how we do things and what we do, is a real tough. Creating democratic people's movements, because we know there's so many organizations out there that are just focused on top down, right? The leaders, they sort of dictate to the rest of the staff, to the rest of their chapters. And we have to build much more horizontal, collective, cooperative movements and build them that way. And lastly, we all know this, the increasing centralization of oligarchy, corporate state due to corporate constitutional rights, money is speech in courts. All right, so we can get into this in discussion. I'll just lay this out. Some possible joint undertakings by building on one another's strengths is conceivably doing some research and writing on topical issues, participating in one another's educational events. This People's Constitution project that I previously mentioned, we're planning a whole series of forums beginning in probably it'll be summer, fall, and then winter. And we'd love to have someone from this network be a part of that, as we try to have representatives from other kinds of networks, as well as overseas. People are working on constitutional renewal in other countries. Strategies to call out the right wing, to call out liberals, Democrats, the neoliberalism philosophy, ideology that is all destined to doom and cataclysmic disaster unless we talk about and work for fundamental, radical, getting to the root alternatives and actions. I don't know what that means, but maybe there's some possibility for some joint street actions or something that is maybe just strategic, or I should say, maybe just, I don't know, symbolic, but would be educational along the process. Anyway, and lastly, right to decide, connecting the efforts that you all are focused on of trying to focus on local self-determination, of how that is so fundamentally difficult if we have a federal constitution backed up by this Supreme Court that constantly says corporations have rights, money is speech. It makes it awfully difficult. But by having successful efforts at the local level, like all you're doing, makes our job easier to say, well, look, the right to decide at the local level, why can't we have that at the federal level and build on that? Maybe some room to look at connecting efforts around mutual aid, and just overall connecting to fundamental constitutional change. I'll just end with Angela Davis, who said, "We can't go on as usual. We cannot pivot to the center. We cannot be moderates. We have to be willing to stand up and say no with our combined spirits, our collective intellects in our many bodies." And I don't know if any of you have ever been to the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati, but it's well worth the visit if you haven't gone. And as soon as you walk in, you see this on the wall. It's something you've all seen before in other places. Always a good reminder, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? Hey, nature never gives up, neither should we. Sorry it took so much time.
Thank you, Greg. That was great. Yes. So if anyone has a question or a comment, I'll look and see. I mean, you can go ahead and unmute yourself unless I needed to mute you. Doug?
Yes, that was an excellent presentation, Greg. I could see your heart and soul is in what you're doing in your work. And there's so many things that we're so parallel with in what we do in our organization that we should definitely have some strong connection with each other. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you brought up that we're all faced with. And the thing is, the strategy is probably the most difficult thing to figure out. And I can see that's when you get really fired up, because we do definitely have to make some changes in the way we approach things. And as far as like reassess our relationship to one another and the earth, is very, very important. In order to achieve everything, we have to win over hearts and minds and the spectrum of allies to go with that. And decipher information by an enlightenment of goodness. Love is like water, you know? I think you understand exactly what I'm saying. And with, you don't have understanding without the knowledge and the wisdom that goes with it. And so love is like water. It's like refreshes and cleanses us in our thinking. So to order to win people over, it's like what we saw going on when we were growing up. I mean, you're a little bit older than me, I think, but the peace movement in the 60s. And, there was a lot of stuff that was probably reckless too that was going on, because we lived in a very tumultuous time as far as the violence that we saw on the street. But when there was a certain period of time when the love part, it's the perfect love. And that is a power in itself. And if we approach all this work all the time, when we deal with other people of all the different spectrum of people, that's the only way you can really reach them. And I would like to see us be at a point. I mean, I think that we should be at the point now, as far as this racism and patriarchy and all this other stuff, sexism, is that should be all behind us now. And if we could just put ourselves in that consciousness that that's done now, it's time to enforce the equal protections under the law and all this other social stuff. All our elders before us were preparing us for all this stuff because they already saw it. So I'm just adding to all your inspiration you've given me to say this. And one more thing, we've been working on the idea of the right of local self-government. And I look at that from in our state, which is a small state. Our strategy was to first to reach our state representatives. And so we worked hard. I wouldn't say we tried, we did almost get there, but we got a third of the vote in the House of Representatives for an amendment in the state of New Hampshire, which it addressed the right to local self-government. and to do away with the preemption of corporate power when it came to our health, safety, and welfare in our communities. But as you know, I know you know this, is because of preemption. It's like even though we passed this ordinance like 15 years ago, it hasn't been challenged, but they can do it at any time, according to some of your colleagues that I've talked to. But that goes along with the local self-determination. So, yeah, everything you said was really powerful. And I'm very thankful for you to actually meet you and to hear what you said. And I hope I related something and, it gets a little bit more energized, because love is a powerful thing. It can overcome evil in any kind of way you want to call it. And that's the power that's going to make the change.
Thank you, Doug. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, very briefly that, I used to work for the American Friends Service Committee, and their slogan for over 100 years is to see what love can do. And, King said, love without power is sentimental and anemic. You have to have both. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power without love is reckless and abusive. So they go hand in hand. We need to have love, and certainly particularly in these days when there's so much pain and hardship and need out there, to care for ourselves, of course, care for others, but we have to be about the business of building power. No question.
That's great. Anyone else have a short question or comment?
Unmute.
I do, Susie. A question that I fight with a lot, Greg, is we like to portray our mission as radical. And that's something that I am fighting, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because I feel we really have to normalize what we're talking about. And when I see radical, I see it on the fringe, and on the fringe with all the other fringe things going on in the world. What we're talking about relates to just basic human needs and just promoting life itself. How do we refer to that as normal? So that, and your thoughts on that, because I know that there's we need to be more radical, and yet the more radical I feel like we're getting over a decade of working in this movement, the more separate we become. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on even the terminology as far as normalizing.
That's a very good question, and not an easy one to simply shortly answer. One of it, of course, comes down to definitions. Definitionally, what is radical? Some people define it all sorts of ways, but it's to get to the basic heart root of something. And I think if you get beyond sort of the superficial things to what is at the root of what is of concern to people, of basic needs, of the kind of policies we have. I mean, there's this gap, is there not? This disconnect between what people want on issue after issue and the kind of policies we don't have. So I think in one sense, radical in terms of addressing root causes of things and dealing with meeting the root needs of things, most people support. And so part of the effort to kind of refashion what we say is, maybe it's to take back some of the terms if they aren't so far gone. Democracy has been freedom, all sorts of things. Some people, when they say sovereignty, other people appeal to democracy, other people self-determination, other people self-governance. It means more or less the same thing, but to different groups, you have to use different words. So I think that's part of the challenge, is knowing who your audience is and framing the words you use, but also to say, do you believe? And I think most people do, even on our friends on the other side, that we don't have the real fundamental right to decide. And that term, right to decide, I think is really such a wonderful, wonderful term. But to lift up, also including that so that people don't oppress others, to affirm the dignity and respect of every person and have a livable world. I think those are things that are universal, but at the same time, they're radical in that they're getting to the very heart and soul of what appeals to people. I don't know.
Thank you.
Carla?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I was thinking about what Kara said, and I understand it. I think one of the things that has meant more and more to me as time goes by is that I don't want to be working on the branches of the tree or even the twigs of the tree. I want to be working on the roots. And so if something is not about fundamental change, then I just don't have time, because I have very little time left at my age. I don't have time to work on trivial things, or even not trivial, but the things that are about the twigs and the branches. I have to look at, is this an issue of fundamental change? And fundamental change that, of course, I want to see. And that's what I need to work on. So that's what works for me. Thanks.
I think the real challenge is if we're trying to appeal to mass numbers of people, so many of whom, increasing numbers, in fact, in our population, are lacking some real fundamental, whether it's food or income or housing or something, and figuring out how to integrate in some way, meeting some kind of felt need. I don't know what that is. You know, some of you may know I spent several months in India a number of decades ago and studied the Gandhian movements for social change. And it was all about connecting the creating the alternative, looking for fundamental change, independence from India, and building a movement. But at the same time, he built the ashrams and created his own clothing and meeting people's basic needs. That was there, not just to meet people's needs, but also strategically. Because strategically, if only you're doing work at that macro level, at some point, the powers to be will say, okay, they've made their demands. We're just going to wait you out. And waiting movements out is death, because that's when you start having the schisms. People start blaming one another. You have to be able to do something. He called it constructive work. People today are calling it mutual aid. But figuring out some way to blend working for, dealing with the roots, but at the same time, if you will, harvesting that tree and using the harvest to help meet immediate needs, if that metaphor even works, is something I think we got to come up with.
That was very lovely, Greg. Thank you.
I think that normalizes it too. I think that brings it to something that everybody wants, no matter where you are on the fringes. And if we get to what the common goal is, if we can bring people into the common goal, then it really isn't so radical. It just becomes that functional fight. Perhaps, my thoughts.
Makes sense.
Anyone else?
It becomes a question of justice then? Is that what it is? Because I never saw it as radical. I saw it as absolutely necessary and human. I don't know, but everything that you're saying, it's overwhelming, but I don't see it. Okay, just a sense.
No, I think you're right. I mean, much of what is being proposed in terms of what Kara said is promoting justice in so many forms. The social, the economic, we need justice in all of these forms.
Yeah, not just justice for humans, but justice for all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
When Carla talked about, what can we do, it reminded me of a little animated video by Wangari Maathai about the story of the hummingbird trying to put out a giant forest fire with one drop in its beak. And all the elephants and big animals are saying, you can't make a difference like that. And the hummingbird says, I'm doing the best I can. And it's a great uplifting video to watch. You can Google it and find it, I'm sure. So, well, thank you again for your time and great presentation, Greg. Oh, was there someone else?
Dave had a question.
Oh, hey, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation. We certainly have a lot of things in common, especially on gaining education for not only ourselves, but other people. So I think as we move forward, I think probably we will come up with maybe one or two avenues to way to connect and broadcast the message better. So, but thanks again.
Well, if I could just respond to that, and maybe Ben wants to as well. I don't know when we first reached out, Ben, sort of lose track of time. Was it early 2020? Geez. But there's been some effort between CELDEF and Move to Amend to just explore some possible ways of working together. And I think that, certainly don't have any final product. We've had a couple of drafts of a single document that we're still working on, that's sort of on hiatus, that speaks to some of the realities of the nonprofit industrial complex that may need to be sort of revisited at some point or redone. But I definitely hope that we can continue this discussion, whether it's two-way or three-way, or bring others in. But I think there's, among the organizations out there that right now are, looking at these issues, the critical nature of the impediments to sort of real democracy, and the impediment to the corporate form, and the lack of justice in all of its forms and its connection to lack of a livable world. I think CELDEF and the National Community Rights Network is at the forefront of it, and we're trying to be there as well. But we obviously have not focused as much on rights of nature as you all have. As you can see from that fourth element that was in our original proposal, we took that out for strategic reasons, but felt that we needed to come back and deal with it. And the place to deal with that may be this People's Constitution. And so hopefully that can be at least one arena where we can visit with one another again.
Yeah, maybe with in national CRN, with some cooperation there, that trickles down to the states from our endpoint. So, but yeah, thanks again.
If I could just say, first off, Greg, thanks so much. Your presentation was really great, and you really covered a lot of stuff.
Sorry
And
about that. Sorry, it took
no,
time.
it was really great that you did it. You put it, you encapsulated it, and you covered a lot of information. And I think that what you did is put out a vision of where you are and where we might meet. And I think NCRN, which, just so you know my role, why am I here on the NCRN? Well, through CELDEF that helped to establish the state CRNs and NCRNs. It just, all it amounted to was helping them get incorporated. But so we're still connected, and I'm essentially the liaison between CELDEF and NCRN. But I think that there is opportunities for Move to Amend, CELDEF, and the CRNs to work together. we can't create a movement by siloing ourselves as organizations and saying, well, this is what we do and this is what we do. We have to say, this is what we all do. And there are places to do that. Your constitutional efforts, bringing ideas in, I think it's very inviting. It's not to say we know what's the best thing. It's we're wondering what's the best thing, and you're asking for input. And this is what solidarity is about. It's trying to create relationship with people and communities and organizations and the rest. And I invite that. And I know that it's tough. There's a lot of, I don't know, there's there's a bit of dragging, a bit of energy lag when you try to make organizations work together. And so as people, and that's what we have here, and we're all in the Brady Bunch version of people with COVID, but here we are, real people, and we can talk and we can share ideas, and that's what we need to do. And you've given us an opportunity to further that. So I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to say Greg's great. I like Greg a lot. And
Oh, Ben, I like you too, buddy.
just saying.
And Greg, I just a quick comment. I know we're after the hour, but I'm constantly saying we need to build an army. We need to put all of our organizations together. And one of the things that maybe something that we could do is have members of MTA on advisory boards for us and us on advisory boards for MTA, so that we can be communicating ideas and building that army. That might be just a thought, but somehow if we can coalesce and pull smaller organizations together, bring them into the fold one at a time, but we are very aligned with what we're trying to do. And I think that that's a great place to start. And I really appreciate this conversation. It was very helpful.
Guy by the name of David Hartso used to work for AFSC out in San Francisco. He started in the spirit of Gandhi's peace army, Santa Sena something or other. Started a nonviolent peace army. So its job is to go in and commit mass civil disobedience in as organized of a way as regular armies do. Because people, generally are just chaotic. They go in and do their own thing. You don't get anywhere. So.
And maybe that's a great idea.
David Hartso. You Google him, you'll find Hartsough, I think. Great guy.
Thank you for the reference.
Yes.
I'd like to say just one
Sandy.
thing really fast.
Sure.
I am so thrilled. I've been with Move to Men for a while and working with a CELDEF group here in Columbus, Ohio. And I am just so thrilled that Move to Men and Community Rights Network are getting together. Good to see you guys. I know I see a lot of people. On the ground, a lot of us have been part of both. So just thrilling. It's just thrilling that it's, happening everywhere, up and down and vice and all around. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Sandy has been bugging me in Ohio about Move to Amend and CELDEF working together probably for 6-7 years, Sandy. Time I see her, that's all she'd say to me.
That is true.
We know everything takes a lot of time. We're not going to change overnight.
Really, we have to.
But we got to figure out how to hurry slowly. You can wrap your head around that. How we do that.
That's good.
Good point.
Yeah.
Very slowly is a really good statement.
With love.
With love. But in building power.
Yes.
Of the people.
We had some anchors around us that are gone now too, so that helps.
So I've heard.
Well, this was a great evening. And again, for more information, you can go to the Move to Amend website, and you can go to the National Community Rights Network website. We actually have a calendar now with events. There's upcoming showings of Invisible Hand, and there's democracy schools and webinars. So check that out. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank
Look
you,
forward
Greg.
to future conversations. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, cuz. It was great.